Well, hi, hello, what's up? It's May 3rd, Sunday night, and I thought I'd make a video about the 27 amendments because, why not? Um, Here we are in the middle of quarantine. We're 1 week until the AP Gov test, and I think that the 27 amendments are important enough for me to make a video because I noticed something. If I make a video, you guys seem to take it a little more seriously. I'm going to be making more videos in the next few days. How's it going? You doing okay? Are you doing okay? Me right now, I got some Oreo mint thins, which are pretty okay, I guess. I did a lot of swimming the last like 7, 8 days. The weather's been nice, and we set up our ghetto fabulous above ground pool, and it's been quite nice actually. What else am I doing? I bought a treadmill. I've been running on the treadmill, which is interesting because I'm not someone who runs, but I was feeling a lack of movement on this quarantine. I've been watching The Last Dance on ESPN, the Michael Jordan documentary, which is very, very good. I highly recommend it. Spending a lot of time with my family, which is good for the most part. Doing a lot of house projects, working on the backyard a lot. I'm building like a barn door right now to put up in our master bedroom for Mother's Day as a present for my wife. Been turning the air conditioning on for the first time. Well, I mean, it started like a week ago, but for the first time this year, turning the air on. Actually, I mean, the weather the last couple days has been perfect. If I could just make it this way for the way that it's been for the last 2 days and make it that way all year long, I would do it, I think. It's just like lovely. Hot enough to swim, but cools off in the evening so that, you go for a drive, you roll down the windows, go to the grocery store because we're not going out unless we have to. And it's just very nice and relaxing. So anyway, I guess I better get started talking about the 27 amendments. So without any further ado, let's go. Okay, so this is just a reminder before I get started that you should print out the paper that is in the folder called the 27 amendments. It should be a blank paper, or you can, if your printer's not working, just make something that looks like that paper on a blank sheet of paper. Okay, here we go. Here we go. I would say that the First Amendment is the most important amendment in the Constitution. Wouldn't you agree? It is the amendment that, the first thing we think of is freedom of speech. And yeah, that is pretty darn important. But we had an acronym that we used in class called RAPS, R-A-P-P-S, to help you remember what the First Amendment was all about: religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech. Let's talk about religion for a second. There are two clauses you need to know. And everything I'm saying right now, I'm thinking about for the AP Gov exam, like the AP Gov test that's going to happen in a week, and the FRQs that they're going to have. And if I emphasize something, know that it's probably because of like, oh, that could totally be on the AP Gov test. So there are two clauses in the Constitution about religion, and one is the Establishment Clause. Do you remember what it is? The government may never establish a church or create a church. And there is the Free Exercise Clause, which is the government can never stop you from exercising your religion. And it's not in the Constitution, but unless exercising your religion is like a crime, like polygamy or animal sacrifice or something. You have the right of assembly. Assembly is like protesting. You see people assembling right now in Huntington Beach saying, I want to go surfing, let me go surfing. I want to get my nails done. Those people are practicing their First Amendment right. They're a little bit annoying, but they're practicing their First Amendment right. You have a right to speech, which is all kinds of stuff that's kind of related to the protest, or just speaking your mind on the internet or something, which is also related to freedom of the press, which is newspapers and blogs and the internet. And finally, you have the right of petition, which I think is confused a lot, which is you have a right to complain to your government, to even file a lawsuit. This is kind of where lobbying comes from. The Second Amendment is very obvious. It is you have the right to own a gun. Some states try to limit those rights, like in California. I think you can't have certain types of semi-automatic assault rifles and stuff, or definitely not fully automatic assault rifles. Anyway, Second Amendment, you have the right to bear arms. The Third Amendment is pretty out of date right now, but it's that soldiers cannot stay in your home. In other words, you cannot be forced to house a soldier in your home. The British did this to us back in the day, and we thought it was important enough to put it in the Constitution. All right, so that America will never do that to Americans. The Fourth Amendment is another very important one. It says that there shall be no unwarranted search and seizure of your stuff. So cops cannot just come in your house without, probable cause, or gosh, even more than probable cause. Like they need to be in hot pursuit, like chasing you into your home. They need to your neighbor needs to say I heard gunshots next door, for them to come in, or they need a warrant in order to come into your home and take your stuff. Fourth Amendment, very important. Okay, the Fifth Amendment is a big one. There's a lot of parts. The most obvious part, you remember our little finger signals. I plead the Fifth. I plead the Fifth means you can't make me testify against myself. Cops can't make me say what I was doing that night if they suspect me of a crime, and they can't put me on the stand in a trial if I'm on trial and it's I'm facing charges. You have a right to a grand jury that needs to press charges against you. This is just for federal crimes. I wouldn't stress too much about this. You don't hear too much about grand jury, but they decide if a case should go forward against you. You have a right to due process, and this is if I'm arrested and if I go to trial, you need to do it in a correct way, a fair way. The government has power of eminent domain, and that means if they take my land, they must pay me. I think of Al's Corner, a bar in Eastvale. They took his land, the Eastvale city took his land and built the fire department, and they paid him for it, even though he did not want to give up the land. They're allowed to take it, but they must pay him. And then double jeopardy, you can't be tried for the same crime twice. And my example for that is OJ was found not guilty. And if he said, I did it, 2 days later, I killed her, I did it, it's too late. He cannot be charged for the same crime twice. The Sixth Amendment is all about trials, and it's all about criminal trials. So this is a trial where, you could go to jail, and you have a right to a speedy trial, which means, you're not going to sit in jail for 10 years while you wait for your trial. But sometimes you might sit in jail for 1 or 2. Trials do take a while. You have a right to have a lawyer, and we have determined that if you're poor, you have a right to a free lawyer. You have a right to a jury of your peers to judge you. And that's it. The Seventh Amendment is just like the Sixth, but instead of criminal trials, this is about civil trials. So you have a right to a speedy trial and a jury and all that. If you're suing, I think Apple sued Samsung for stealing some of their ideas or something. So they got a jury and they got a speedy trial. They had these rights. Most people don't go to civil trial with a jury. That's pretty rare. Your parents getting divorced or something, they're not going to go to civil trial with a jury. Probably not. Okay, the Eighth Amendment says no cruel and unusual punishment, no torture. We have determined that the death penalty does not count as cruel and unusual punishment. How about also what's missing is no unreasonable bail. If someone steals a loaf of bread, we're not going to give them a year in prison and say that they have to pay $50,000. We're going to keep it reasonable. The Ninth Amendment, if you remember our hand signals, how do I do it? Like this. Remember the little thumb was I have more rights, and this is Americans have more rights than what's listed in the Constitution. There's more than what's there. This is just some of the ones that exist. The 10th Amendment, I would say, is a top 3 or 4 amendment, very important, and it's that states have rights reserved for them. States are not powerless. Any power that the federal government doesn't have, the states do have. And we call this reserved powers, powers that are reserved for the states. Okay, the first 10 amendments you just heard were the Bill of Rights. Do you remember the finger, memorization game? Let's try to do it together right now. You ready? I haven't done this since we did it in class, so I might be a little rusty. Speech, press, religion, assembly, petition. Order was probably messed up. Bang, bang, Second Amendment. Get out of here, soldiers. Where's your warrant? I plead the Fifth. Speedy trial. Make it rain for civil trials. Don't torture me. Don't torture me. I have more rights. rights. And finally, the states reserve their power. There you go. Remember that. Okay, we go from the 10 very important amendments to number 11, which is the dumbest amendment. I don't even care to explain it. It has to do with states and their ability to sue each other and people suing each other from different states. It's so boring and it doesn't matter. So let's skip it. Just write on your paper lawsuits against states. Okay, the 12th Amendment made some changes about how we elect our president and vice president. Back in the day, this is so crazy. The president was the person that got the most votes, and the vice president was the person who got the second most votes. So you ended up with like the winner and the loser like working together, sort of. It was just very strange. I don't even want to say working together, but they were both elected into the government. And that's kind of odd. Imagine like Hillary and his vice president, I'm sorry, Trump and his vice president was Hillary. How strange that would be. So with the 12th Amendment, we changed that so that the president who is elected gets to pick their vice president instead of having it be the person that came in second place, which I think makes a lot of sense. Okay, with the 13th Amendment, we entered this series of 3 amendments. If you had a good U.S. history teacher, maybe you learned this. We call these the Reconstruction Amendments because they're all after the Civil War. They all have to do with African American rights or like former slaves' rights, but they benefited kind of everybody. So let's take a look. The 13th Amendment banned slavery, and I recommend you watch a documentary on Netflix called 13th if you want to learn about modern day slavery and prisons and suppressing African American vote and stuff. But anyway, 13th Amendment ended slavery. Okay, the 14th Amendment I think is like the first or second most important amendment in the Constitution. Probably First Amendment is the most important, and this is the second most. Put a star by it, highlight it, and highlight number 1 and number 4 and 5. 1, 4, 5, and 14. But 14 I think is like number 2 most important. So let's take a look. It's got lots of different parts. The 14th Amendment was passed. Like, why was it passed? They wanted to make sure that states were treating African Americans fairly, like former slaves fairly. So they said everyone is entitled to equal protection of the law, regardless of the color of their skin, and everyone is entitled to due process, regardless of the color of their skin. And everyone who is born here is a citizen. That's become kind of controversial in the modern day and age. That you can come here and have a baby, and that baby is an American citizen. So let's take a look at this one with a little more detail. You really need to know like number 1 and number 2 part of this, and number 4. So basically, I don't think they wrote this back in the day knowing how important this amendment would become. But judges are going to use the 14th Amendment, and I think it was like Gitlow. Remember Gitlow v. New York, which was the first case to do this? They're going to use the 14th Amendment to start applying the Bill of Rights to the states. Because back in the day, the Bill of Rights only applied to the federal government. Like, the federal government can't limit your right of freedom of speech. With the 14th Amendment, judges, the Supreme Court, they're going to find a way to like tie in and make the Bill of Rights slowly, remember there's a word for that, selective incorporation. They're going to slowly apply the Bill of Rights to the states. And they're going to always use one of these clauses. Oh, you have freedom, like Eastville tried to limit your freedom of speech. Well, you have equal protection. You know, like they're going to use one of these clauses to apply something to the states or apply something to Eastvale. And so over time, almost all of the Bill of Rights has been applied to state and local governments because of the 14th Amendment. Very important amendment. Very likely to be on your FRQ. Finally, the last of the Reconstruction Amendments is the 15th Amendment, and it's voting rights for all men, regardless of race. So it's basically African Americans men get the right to vote, but it helped out everybody, Native Americans and Japanese and Chinese and all kinds of different people. The 16th Amendment is kind of one of the more depressing amendments. Before this, Congress, there was some question whether they could like tax Americans, like their income. You know, like you get a paycheck in a year, you make $50,000, and the government takes 5,000 of it. Well, the reason they do that is because they passed the 16th Amendment, and I'm pretty sure a lot of this had to do with I think like one of the wars. We needed to raise money for the wars. I'm going to say World War I or something, and so we passed this amendment so that we could do that. Okay, I looked up when the 16th Amendment passed. It was before World War I, so maybe I'm just wrong. But I will say the way the government used to raise money was by taxing stuff that came to America, or that was sent to other countries, and after the 16th Amendment, they make most of their money from taxing us in our paycheck. The 17th Amendment said that we could directly elect senators. If you remember, the Constitution said that state legislatures, like Sacramento, used to choose our 2 senators. Remember, every state has 2. But after that, we vote for our senators. So Kamala Harris, she was voted on by the people of California, not by Sacramento, not by our state legislatures. The 18th Amendment, gosh, is this what's more depressing, the 16th Amendment or the 18th? I'm not sure, but the 18th Amendment banned alcohol. This created prohibition, and for like 12 years in this country, the sale of alcohol was illegal. So the 18th Amendment banned alcohol. Tell me in the comments below, what's the worst amendment to the Constitution? Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. The 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. And the year was 1920. Women got the right to vote. The 20th Amendment, not super important. It's not going to come up too much, but it changed the calendar. I think, if I remember correctly, that the president used to start like in March, but then it gave like that election time, like from November to March, like knowing that the current president wasn't going to be there anymore. It was like a big waste of 5 months. So as technology got better and stuff, we moved up the start date for the president and Congress to Congress January 3rd and the president January 20th. The 21st Amendment is a very easy one to remember because when you're 21 you can drink, and because of the 21st Amendment it got rid of the 18th Amendment. So if you look at your textbook at the 18th Amendment, it's like crossed off because the 21st Amendment basically crossed off the 18th Amendment. You're 21, you can drink again. The 22nd Amendment, the 22nd Amendment says that the president, remember before this, the president could just run forever. FDR, he was elected for 16 years. He died at the beginning of his 4th term. He served like 12 or 13 years. So the 22nd Amendment, they changed that in the 1950s and said, all right, you can only be president for 2 terms or 10 years maximum. Oh, and just a little memory device so that you can like remember the 22nd Amendment. It is 2 terms, 22nd. 2 terms, 22nd. The 23rd Amendment gave Washington, D.C. the right to vote for president. It gave them 3 electoral votes. That's nice. That's a nice thing to do. The 24th Amendment abolished all poll taxes. It says you can't tax people. You can't make someone pay $5 to vote. Okay, the 25th Amendment deals with it's all about the president and vacancy. They're like updating kind of like who is president and like what, not who is president, but like when the presidency can change. I'll give you an example. When Ronald Reagan was shot, I don't know if you know, Ronald Reagan was shot like after he became president. He was in the hospital, like he was in surgery and like, totally not able to help for like 2 weeks. They gave the presidency over to Bush for like a couple weeks, which was his vice president. So they're able to do that because the 25th Amendment says if in case of an emergency, they can temporarily like move the presidency around. It also dealt with like presidential succession. You remember we looked at that list of like how all those people that like they're first in line, second in line, third in line, fourth in line. We can go through it right now. Vice president's first in line, Speaker of the House, second in line, President pro temp of the Senate, third in line, Secretary of State, I think, fourth in line. So that all of that is written out in the 25th Amendment. There's also something with, if you ever see this, this is like a new thing that I've only noticed like with Trump, is the 25th Amendment. It's not new, I guess it's in there, but people never talked about it. The cabinet could vote if the majority of the cabinet votes that the president is like mentally unstable or unfit for office, like they could like kick him out of office and replace him with the vice president too, I guess, with the 25th Amendment. 26th Amendment says that 18-year-olds now have the right to vote. This is during the Vietnam War, and we were drafting these kids to fight in the war, and a lot of people felt like, wow, we're making them fight in the war and they can't even vote. We should like lower a lot of states, their voting age was 21. So they lowered your right to vote to 18 years old. And a way that I remember this one, this is kind of wonky, but 2 + 6 is 8, and 18-year-olds can vote. Is that a stretch maybe? I don't know. Okay, and the last amendment is another dumb one. It's the 27th Amendment. And Congress, do you know who like controls how much money Congress makes, like their salary? They make like $150,000, something like that. They're the ones that decided how much money they make. So it says that Congress cannot give themselves a raise until after the term ends. So if they voted for a raise today, it wouldn't take effect until January 3rd of next year. I guess that way, if we got pissed off, we could vote them out because if we were like annoyed by what they did. All right, this video is like 20 minutes long, so I better cut it off, but I hope you're doing well and stay tuned. I plan on making some more videos. Hope you're studying for the AP Gov test. Peace.